So, good morning, Charged Up Studio listeners, and welcome back to another episode where you get charged up for success. I'm Dana Olivo, your host and CEO of Market Atomy LLC, and today we are going back to school to learn about DNA. That's the DNA of your company brand. Our guest today has a distinguished career as an expert in brand clarity, an author, and public speaker. She has developed a proprietary process designed to achieve extreme clarity on brand differentiation, consistency, and trust that trigger behaviors and actions from the inside out. It's known as the brand DNA approach. There are so many accolades behind this woman's name that it would take this entire podcast to explore them all. So let's please welcome to Charged Up Studio, Miss Suzanne Tulien.
Tulien, yes.
I did it right.
Happy you did it. Yes. Happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me, Dana. Appreciate it.
Oh, no. I'm so glad. I was excited when we talked during our pre-onboarding session. So this is a very interesting and important topic that not all micro business owners take into consideration. Right. Before we get started, tell our audience a little bit more about how and why you have built your own brand around being the brand clarity expert.
Well, I can go back to being in the field of marketing and advertising, graphic design, PR, all of those communication subject matters, right? For years and years. And I was a communication major, actually, in school, and a graphic design minor. And that's what I wanted to do, is I wanted to help people really express who they were, their businesses, to get it out there in a very visually impactful way and through narrative and copywriting and that sort of thing. And I was just fascinated by the world of advertising and communications. Like, what is it that draws us to something? What is it that creates the resonating factor for us to buy something or get, make decisions to buy something? So that was where I was going until I realized that there was this thing called brand. And what a brand is really is all it is just a perception. When you really think about it, down to the nut, it's just a perception. And when we market a brand, right? So marketing is the verb. It's the dissemination and communication of information out there. And the brand is that perception that we're out there communicating. But the perception has so much more depth than that. So I was fascinated by that. I also had a really, really close to a psychology minor. And I really wanted to understand what this thing called brand was. And so I dove into that a little bit, leaving corporate America and realizing that I could start my own company and build my own brand, so to speak, and help people really understand what that was all about. So that's kind of what led me to be in this field. Yes.
When you think about it, brand is the feeling that we get. You said the perception, but it also relates to the feeling when we hear the name or we hear the music or we do this or we do that, Right. It's the emotion that's left behind.
So you're right. The brand itself is not the logo. It never is, never was. It's just an icon that we connect to that feeling, that emotion, that perception of the interaction we've just had with that person or that business. So when I see that icon, then I'm going to remember that visceral sense, that perceptual sense. And in those colors, those fonts, that image will remind me of that. So it's the brand, and branding is actually the process of assigning meaning to that perception, to whatever perceptions you want others to have of you. So I am not a marketer. I'm not the person that's going to disseminate the information for the client. I'm the person that's going to assign the meaning of the brand for the client. Does that make sense?
It does. But in order to do that, we've got to be in their heads.
Well, no, it's the charge of the client, of the owner of the business, the personal brand, the solopreneur, all the way to the company who has 10,000 employees, to identify, define, and align themselves to specific attributes that they want to show up in and walk the talk to deliver on the promise. Then we take that information and we deliver it. We disseminate that out to the market. That's what marketing then becomes.
Right. No, I understand. That kind of gets into my next question was, and I know it's a loaded question. Okay.
They all are.
They all are, because it's so confusing that this aura of marketing and advertising and sales and everything else, because that's all integrated together here. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of misconceptions out there about branding. What is a brand? Can you help clarify what a brand is? And you've already started doing that. Mm-hmm. But where I was going earlier, when you were talking about, I said we have to get into their heads. We have to know who our target market is. Yes. And what's going to resonate with them to be able to build that DNA around our brand, right?
Well, okay. So there's the chicken or the egg concept, right? And yes. Talk about loaded questions. So I have a philosophy as a brand clarity expert that brand is the foundational element that is necessary in order for you to successfully market long-term. Because if you don't know who you are and what you stand for and what your value position is, then what are you out there marketing? So you're out there, if you haven't done the work, let's just say you haven't done the formalize, identify, define, and align yourselves to a brand value position, then you're out there marketing something that has not yet been defined. And so my question for my prospects and clients are, how can you fully deliver on a promise you have not yet fully defined for yourself and your employees? So that has to happen first. I mean, I see companies all the time spending money in marketing without having formally defined their brand. It doesn't mean they're successfully marketing. It means they're chasing the client.
Right. No, I understand that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Because they don't have that fundamental understanding of who they are and how they show up to then attract in a pull versus a push in marketing messaging.
Yeah. No, and that's exactly where the confusion comes in sometime, let's take my brand for example. Okay. Mm-hmm. We've got Market Academy. All right. That is the brand for my online platform. Now, I went into this academy with a cultural message, okay, that we are focusing on those first stage businesses. Mm-hmm. And we understood what they're going through. We've been there. We've done that. We want that to come across, which is what we're putting through into the environment. Now, the brand name, Market Academy, also came out of a concept that was developed, which compares marketing of a business or a business to the human body.
Right.
And that's why Market Academy came about, because it's all about bringing customers through the door. And how do you do that? And so where you're going is we have to know where we're coming from. What is our mission, our vision that we are moving? What is it that we want people to remember us for?
Yeah. So your brand, in my opinion, Dan, and this is a great conversation because I think it's really going to be clarifying.
Right.
Is your company name, your business name is Market Academy, right? Mm-hmm. So there are other companies out there who serve your market as well. And also say they're a university or say they might, be a learning environment that teaches them. So the brand is what actually creates the distinction between you and your competition. Right. Other people who are saying they're doing what you're doing. I wouldn't say it's your brand name. I would say that's your business name. Your brand is what I feel and sense and believe to be true when I experience you. Yes. And I learn what you're promising to deliver and you deliver on it.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Yes. And that's exactly it. Now, in support of what you were saying is I needed to know where I was coming from.
Exactly.
Before I could even come up with the name, you know, although the name happened kind of accidentally.
Yeah. So
but anyway,
it's beautiful because when you came up with that name, now that you have your name is kind of a story in and of itself, right? And so there's narrative inherent in anatomy, right?
Yeah.
And then you can begin to talk about DNA and you can talk about those things that are all intricately involved in building the foundation of the business, which would be, you know, the body, building the body of the business. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So it's a great narrative, but now you can really design your deliverables, you know, your approach, your delivery, your narrative, all of those things around this particular promise.
Right.
But so many businesses aren't doing that.
Yeah. And this brings me to my next question. Okay. You co-wrote the book called Brand DNA, right? Yes. Where you focused on the story behind the brand being part of its DNA.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes. So
yes. Dimensional nucleic acids is what DNA stands for.
Oh, really? Whoa.
Yes. Yeah.
So why should a brand tell a story? What are some of the ways of revealing that story to the world or your client or whoever? I mean, that might be a big question too.
Yeah. So human beings learn through storyboarding. Yeah. They storyboard in their brains all the time. If you understand the synapses and neurology and, you know, how we make connections from one thing to another, we're building out our own story and everyday experiences that we have. That's how we learn. And it's sequential, you know, timeline sort of thought processes. Mm-hmm. So every company, whether they've mapped it out or not, has a story and has a way of being. And that way of being is, in my opinion, the promise in my process, the promise of their delivery. And it's never specific. The brand is never specifically their product or their service. Just on a real basic level, it's not their product or service. It's the how they go about delivering that product and service, which is creates the differentiation, and how what they're promising is actually delivered upon, and is it true? So trust, well, consistency builds trust, right? So if I know my brand, I'm going to be more consciously, strategically, and deliberately consistent in what I'm saying about my company and what I deliver, and also how I deliver on it.
Right.
And until I know that, and I'm crystal clear on what that is, then I cannot possibly do that consistently.
And that comes with practice too.
Yes.
You know, and hit or miss, you know, because there'll be times when you're out there talking about what you do and you're refining it as you go, you know, and the way people perceive it, you take that in and until you hit that mark.
Well, I would also say, Dana, you know, that's definitely what most companies end up doing, is refining it based on customer feedback or non-feedback.
Yeah.
But I want to also make sure we understand that you own the business, that you own this company, that you know your stuff, right. You know what you're delivering on. And not everyone that you're looking for feedback from is your customer. So exactly. I want to be really careful about what I call the peanut gallery out there. Mm-hmm. In getting so much feedback, it becomes so confusing and muddled that you don't know what direction to go in, right?
Right. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. You know, when I originally started this and went out, I mean, I was specifically talking to my target audience, you know, to make that connection, because I had been there. You know, I've had 2 failed businesses. and come out of them until I went back to college and realized what I didn't know about building a business. Okay. So by talking to them, I could relate to them. And that's where that trust factor comes in. That trust factor and that vulnerability. When you can be vulnerable in front of them and they can see that you've struggled just like they are, that's where, you start developing that brand.
Mm-hmm. And to be consistent in growing and evolving the brand, but staying true to the brand's value, position, and promise, instead of going off on tangents all over the place because you're being so reactive to your environment that you're no longer in the driver's seat. Right. That's where danger happens, when companies don't really solidify their core value proposition as a brand. Right. I wanted to say, I see on Facebook all the time, mostly soloprenarial companies, people that are the brand of their business, throwing up logo designs and asking their peanut galleries to comment on them.
Which one?
and then you look see there's 1,000 comments and every one of them is different. So what do you do with that? Right? My work is about giving the level of clarity to the owner in their value position, that they know themselves which is the correct logo. Right? They know what represents them. Right. And that's what I think is missing out there, is the time to do that reflection and that introverted understanding and peeling back the onion. Is like, what do I stand for? What do I promise? And how am I going to deliver this consistently? What do I want to become known for? Right.
And that's exactly it. They get so wrapped up in the business, chasing checks just to bring that check through the door. And they're not, and they are inconsistent. Okay. They may offer discounts here and then, not here, or, they may think, okay, I can tweak this a little bit to meet their needs, that type deal. And
that's a dilemma. That's a big dilemma for them, because when they tweak to please the customer all the time, they're diluting their own values.
Their original culture, yes, all of it. I agree. Me working with micro entrepreneurs, I can't tell you how many people told me, you're not going to make it. You're not going to make it. They can't pay anything, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But my passion has always been micro entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. All right. And so it was a matter of, okay, if I'm going to continue serving micro entrepreneurs, how can I do it at a price point they can afford, which is where the academy came about.
Yes. Yep.
And I think that's important. That's the way, if you are passionate about your business and what you do, your why, then everything else will fall into place. You will realize, as long as you stick to what your passion is.
Yes.
So yeah, no, definitely. So I recently published a blog on branding, entitled "What Is It and Why Is It Important?" where I briefly talked about the different types of branding. Okay. And at this point, I was talking about the different ways branding can emote reactions from consumers. Okay. It could be a smell. It could be a sound, all of that. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So one of the exercises in the process that I deliver is a multisensorial branded experience. So let's take a deep dive into really getting to know your brand at that visceral level. And so that if your brand were to become, let's say, a character in a movie or a cartoon or something like that came alive, what would it look like? What would it feel like? What would it taste like? What would it smell like? What would, all these different aspects. It really gets you on the right side of your brain so you can get super creative and really begin to create some consistencies in how you show up. But it's super powerful. Brands that attach themselves to certain smells or certain colors, of course, logo is important, but it's a visual representation or a visceral representation of a trigger that you're going to trigger that person to feel, right? Or remember when they have connected with you before, and then when they see that or smell that or hear that again, they're going to remember that experience. So that's what the multisensorial branded experience is really all about, and owning something that no other competitor in your industry has in terms of sound or colors or smell or whatever it might be. But you can really begin leveraging these sorts of sensory attributes if you really sit down and think through your brand. And again, it's a process in the book and it's a process in the DNA. But it really forces you to get down to the nut, and where then you, the business owner, can begin to discern more accurately when you make decisions about growing your brand or about producing another product or you're growing your reach in a new market, right? It really helps you decide, is this a good fit for that or not? Because you've created such clarity around what you know to be true about who you are as a brand.
Interesting. When I start thinking about this stuff, I think of things like Nike and the swish. And if you hear a swish, you know that that's Nike, as far as that's concerned. There's a lot of things that we don't realize are part of the brand, the all-encompassing brand.
Yes.
Until
there's so many variables that you can play with. Uh-huh.
Yes, definitely.
And that's where Pandora's box just opens up. Like, the clarity brings this. It's not really that the clarity confines you. It really opens up this box of creativity around, now I can do all these things that are consistent with who I say I am, right?
Right,
yeah.
Exactly. So let's talk a little bit more about uncovering the business's true DNA and how you communicate its integrity through the brand. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, there are pieces and parts to the brand's DNA. And in the process that I've developed with my previous business partner, my co-pioneer, right, we developed this process where, of course, the fundamental piece is core values. In really understanding a set of core values, not any more than 5, preferably 4. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing, Dana, it's not about just coming up with these words that you think define you. It's so much deeper than that. It's about, and most companies don't do this, that I have found, is they don't even define the terms they come up with. So in the core values, when you've come up with a core value, then the process of defining that core value in all the buckets of where the business lives, like for a business with employees, it would be financial, customers, employees, and systems and processes. Let's say they've got these 4 buckets. So how does this company value this? Let's just say they value integrity. That's a very common one.
Yeah.
And if they really want to stick with that and they really want to show up that way and deliver on that, then they have to look at, okay, let's look at our customers. What does integrity look like from us for our customers? And write a few sentences about how they're accurately showing up that way right now. Then you look at the employee bucket. How does integrity show up in our culture, in our hiring processes, in our letting go processes, right? In our how we communicate to our employees. So we're looking at these separate buckets, right? And we're defining that one term with the filter of all these areas. So it's never just about the customer. I really want to express that. Yeah. Because until you as a company have a fundamental understanding of who you are, you cannot possibly consistently sustain delivering on it unless you're clear.
And that goes that is the big push between the customer experience. Because all of those buckets go into enhancing that experience that the customer is going through. So even though it's not just the customer, the end result may be the customer experience.
Sure.
You know,
So, but it starts way before that, right? It starts underground, and you look at that, the iceberg.
Build that infrastructure. Yeah.
It's all that stuff, that ice under the water that we have to create as a brand to really then show up. Yeah.
Wow. No, there's a lot that goes into it, and people don't realize, let's talk a little bit about brand management. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about that a little bit? And the consistency in brand penetration.
So from my side of the coin, where I am an organizational development consultant, meaning I work internally with companies, you're focused on that external dissemination and how do you do
when I'm talking about this
out there?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So brand management in my eyes is, first, you can't manage something you're not clear on, right? So we're going back to that clarity again. We've got to flush it out. What are our dimensional nucleic assets? That is our value position and our differentiator.
I like that term. I like that phrase.
And then we look at those buckets and we start to infuse the brand's attributes, the DNA of the brand, into the hearts and minds of our employees. And we ensure that they truly understand what the definitions of our core values are, the definitions of our brand style attributes are, which we haven't talked about yet. That's another piece of the DNA. Mm-hmm. And then what our true quantifiable differentiators are as an organization. I try to get my clients to really get quantified statistics on what makes them different versus their competitors. And then what are our standards of performance in delivering on our DNA? So all of this great juicy stuff, once we define our brand's DNA, gets infused into the culture. And that's, to me, that's the epitome of brand management. When all of our people who are what I call brand ambassadors of the organization, whether it's 2 more people or 5,000 more people, right? How do we infuse this information so that everybody's walking the talk and delivering on the promise? And they're there because they want to be there, right?
Just be a good proponent of that, with their employees and everything, that's out there. Mm-hmm. They pretty much. So talk a little bit about the quantifiable style or whatever it is that you were talking about.
The quantifiable differentiators. So those differentiators aren't just the fact that we offer quality products or quality services, right?
Anybody can say that.
Yeah, differentiators would be like we're open 24/7. That's a number, right? It's 24/7 all the time. That's a differentiator if it is in your industry, right? Mm-hmm. We have worked with 2,300 clients in the first 6 months of business. Numbers. We have a retention rate of 98% of our employees have been with us for over 10 years. Those types of things is what I help clients take deep dives in and really begin to flush out those key things, because not only do these differentiators impress potential clients, your markets out there, but they're also a great recruitment tool when you're wanting to hire the best of the best. When you know your numbers in terms of benefits packages, retention rates, higher education support, those types of things, work from home, those types of things, 30% of our employees work from home, something like that. Mm-hmm. Knowing those numbers is part of understanding the brand's benefits, the credentials, the street cred, what do we bring to the table that our competitors don't? So that's what I mean by those quantifiable differentiators.
If I take that statement, that what you just said, and apply it to what we're doing with Market Academy, it's not necessarily numbers, but our differentiator is the way that we approach the process. Okay.
That can be quantified too. If you really take some deep dives, you can quantify that approach. But I wouldn't dismiss the numbers. I would say, we might have 30,000 clients have gone through the academy or whatever that number is, right? We're streaming live this many hours a week. We are, there's so many numbers to find.
I mean, it could be the number of courses that we offer, it's, with us, it's the roadmap that we give them. It's the sequential plan that we give them.
How many hours of education are you offering?
That's true. That's true.
Okay. When you really peel it back, you can find those.
Okay. I didn't think about it that way, but that's true. That's true. Okay.
You can have a whole page on differentiators, right, on your website.
Yeah.
Why choose Market Academy?
Yep. No, definitely. Wow. That's, definitely.
Pretty cool
so
stuff.
Let's, any last minute tips or words of wisdom for our audience you want to give? Anything I have not asked you that you could touch on?
Gosh. Well, if you haven't done the formalized assigning of meaning to your brand, then I would highly recommend you take a look into that. And there are super inexpensive ways to do that. One's $20 for the book. There's an online course. But really take a look at that so that you can get in the driver's seat and you're not playing this reactive game out there and chasing the client because they are fickle. Right? Yes. They don't know what they want until they see it, right? So you get in the driver's seat and drive your own growth.
Right.
The other thing I would say is, your marketing might get clients in the door, but it is your brand that keeps them coming back.
Yeah. Which ties into the experience.
It does.
It ties into the experience. So.
And you don't want to offer just a fun, gimmicky experience just for the fun, gimmicky effect. You want to offer a highly relevant, resonating customer experience that is aligned with the brand you promise to deliver on. Very good.
Very good. So how can our audience members reach out to you should they wish to? And what are the links where they can go for the programs that you were just talking about?
Okay. Well, I do have a free Kickstarter toolkit for those who are interested in just understanding brand a little bit more. There's several pieces in this toolkit. And that is on my website, brandascension.com. And you want to look at the Kickstarter Toolkit tab, and you'll get right there. And you can sign up. It's free. There's several emails that go out and deliver these pieces, these resources for small businesses and micro businesses. And then the course, the personal brand clarity course designed for the solo professional, the coach, the author, the speaker, the consultant, the distributor, the broker, the agent. That is www.personalbrandpresence.com. And that's the landing page of all the information about the course. Super powerful course. You've got to carve out time for that, though, because it is work.
No, definitely. All of my courses, I tell them, my courses in Academy are broken down into two components. You have the learning component, and then you have the interactive component. So by the time they're done with these courses, they will have a customized plan for their business.
Nice.
And that's what it's all about. Then it doesn't become shelf help,
Right. Right. And the last piece is just my book, which is on Amazon, Personal Brand Clarity, or like you mentioned, Brand DNA, are the two books I have out on Amazon, including a couple of ebooks. But these two are the books with the most meat in them in terms of the process to uncover, identify, define, and align yourself to your brand. Yeah.
Right. No, definitely. And we'll include the links for all of these things in the transcripts once we have uploaded this podcast. So that concludes our podcast for today. So please leave a review on any of the streaming platforms you are listening to us on, or go to Charged Up Studio's Facebook page and leave a review there. Charged Up Studio is a product of Market Academy, the e-learning system designed specifically with the micro business owner in mind. For more information and to register for our many courses, go to marketacademy.academy. So I look forward to talking more with you next week when our guest will be the best kept secret today. No, seriously, we still are nailing down our speaker for next week. So stay tuned to find out. Talk to you then, and go out and have a charged up week. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you so much.